Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Let's give a couple of minutes for everyone to join, and then we can start with today's webinar. Hello again. Thank you for joining today's webinar on the 2026 auction transition, Romania's new rule to grid capacity. My name is Inessa. I represent Investing Network, and we at Investing Network see this webinar as a natural lead-in to our Energy Week Black Sea, the flagship event that's happening in Bucharest in February. I hope we will see many of you there in person, and if you have any questions about the event, please do not hesitate to contact me. Before we get started, I would like to take a minute to go over some housekeeping rules. So we want to keep this as interactive as possible. So at any time, if you have questions, just feel free to type them into Q&A, the control panel at the bottom. And as time allows, we'll take as many questions as we can, and this will be at the end of the session. Without further ado, I'd like to present our amazing speakers for today. Tatiana Fyodorov, she is a managing partner at Fyodorov and Partners. She will guide us today through the regulatory frameworks. And Tatiana, so thank you so much for the opportunity to work on this webinar together. I just wanted to let everyone know that Tatiana came with the idea. She realized that this is going to be a very important topic for many of developers and IPPs who have pipelines in Romania. So thanks for this opportunity. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and I really look forward to hearing all the updates that you prepared for us. And of course, Mats Lundin from Emergy. Mats is going to share his developer's perspective, backed by extensive experience in project development, commercial structuring, and navigating grid connection challenges in emerging markets. I'm really excited to see Mats with us today, and I can't wait to hear your insights, Mats. So yeah, I hope it's going to be very beneficial for all of you. And as we want to keep it within 1 hour. So let's just get started with it. Tatiana, I'll stop sharing my thing, and let's get started with your presentation.
Thank you, Nessa. Thank you for the presentation. And let's start the presentation, which, as Inessa mentioned previously, is focused on a fundamental shift in Romania's grid connection regime, namely the transition from the traditional first come first served principle to a system based on competitive allocation of grid capacity. The story began in August 2024 when Romania adopted the regulatory framework by approving the methodology governing grid capacity allocation for electricity generation projects. While the methodology is already enforced from regulatory perspective, its effective application is scheduled to begin on 1st of January 2026. In essence, this regulation introduces a completely new approach on how grid connection capacity is requested, evaluated, and ultimately allocated. Instead of administrative sequencing based on submission dates, access to available grid capacity will be determined through auction procedure. So in first slide, we have the purpose of today's presentation. which is to offer a practical first slide. I will briefly present the scope of today's presentation is to offer a practical overview, particularly relevant for investor active or planning to become active in the Romania energy market. We will briefly cover the scope of application of new rules, the timeline for implementation with a particular focus on the transitional regime, as the legislator has attempted to ensure that the shift to the auction-based system is not uh, intrusive as possible, and grid connection request already submitted but not yet resolved. We will also cover the role and impact of the global solution study, the eligibility criteria for the project and for the investor, a very high level overview of the auction rules, and finally, the key elements of the capacity allocation agreement. From the outset, I want to mention that the order which approves the methodology is currently undergoing certain amendments. We understand that few days ago, National Energy Regulatory Authority has already approved the modification order, which is expected to be published in official gazette these days. Um, the main purpose of these amendments is to shift certain implementation deadlines, acknowledging the fact that grid operators are not yet fully prepared to operationalize the methodology with the original anticipated time frame. With this context in mind, let us move to the first topic, which is the scope of application of the new grid capacity allocation rules. When we look at the scope of application of the methodology, the first important point is to clarify who the new rules actually apply to. The methodology governs the legal and technical relationship between grid operators and grid users. In practical terms, the rules will apply to requests concerning electricity generation facility, also combined consumption and generation facility, whether or not they include energy storage, as well as standalone energy storage installations, provided that installed capacity is equal or greater than 5 megawatt. In addition to new project, the methodology also applies in situation when existing generation facility requests an increase in evacuation capacity, or investors seek to connect additional generation units, including energy storage installation, again subject to the same 5 megawatt capacity threshold. From the
Tatjana,
investment perspective,
Tatjana,
sure.
I think that coming in here as, so to say, the developer representative, um, I think that when we see this scope of application, it's really, really interesting to see that the Romanian authorities are now trying to refocus the old system that has been in place basically since I entered the Romanian market in 1998. And I think that it's very good to see that there is a progression into a more specific way of handing out the interconnections, which is obviously a very rare piece right now to find large opportunities to install wind power, solar power, as well as BESS in the market. And from the developer sides, I think we look at it as a very positive step. At the same time, I think that you will be following up, and there will be a number of areas where maybe the new legislation, as always, is a bit unclear, and also the implementation of this study, the global study, how that will really be done by the grid operator. But please, Nathan, I just wanted to come in here and say that.
Thank you for your note here, Mads. Indeed, you are right. The scope of application triggers upcoming projects, and we will see how this will be implemented. And I think the most important slide will be the next one, which actually target the question you anticipated. So, in terms of timeline, the implementation of the auction-based grid capacity allocation system follows a phased and deliberately delayed timeline. This was considered necessarily given the complexity of the global study, which you mentioned earlier, and preparatory steps required for this for its drafting. Um,
Yeah, no, I
one
think
of
that
the key
I think one of the things that developers like myself, I have been very active in, as Nessa was mentioning, in Ukraine, but I've also been in Turkey, where a similar system of allocating capacities has been used. And what we have seen in Turkey over the many years, I came in there 2006 the first time, and I finalized constructing 23 megawatt of wind power in 2015, if I remember correctly now. And the complexity of these global solution studies is really tremendous. And since the network is changing both in terms of consumers, production, etc., a number of different options in terms of nuclear, which may enter the market as well. And then, of course, the uncertainty of budget allocation.
Indeed, the main idea for the global study is that before switching to the tender procedure, the system must be put on hold. And in the timeline I presented, we can obviously see that until end of October next year, actually no grid connection will be approved unless certain exceptions, which I really I think they are important and I want to present. One of the key priority of the regulator has been to allow the processing of the grid connection requests already submitted under the current regime before actively putting the system on hold and switching to auction mechanism. Under the transition framework, the intention is that grid connection requests submitted by 31st December of the current year may be still finalized under the existing first come first served regime, provided certain conditions will be met. More specifically, transition protection applies to requests for which a solution study has been submitted to the grid operator by 31st December and which are pending, meaning no ATR has yet been issued. These projects, the regulations allow the ATR to be issued by 30 June 2026, which is defined as transition period. We can see it in green on the scheme on the screen. In practical terms, if a potential grid user has initiated a grid connection procedure and managed to submit the solution study by the end of the current year, that project may still benefit from the regime and obtain an ATR by the end of the first half of next year. However, and this is very important clarification, the transitional regime does not operate as an automatic guarantee that an ATR will be issued. After submitting the solution study, the applicant and the grid connection steps regulated by the current regulations. More specifically, the solution study must be approved and endorsed by GTS Commission. Grid operator must notify the applicant. The applicant has the obligation to choose one of the proposed solution within 2 months, and obviously must provide the 5% bond of the grid connection tariff. Only once all these steps are completed, the grid operator will issue the ATR. Accordingly, both the applicant and the grid operator remain subject to regulatory timelines and obligation. From a practical perspective, these transitional rules raise some concerns. So, if we take the most extreme scenario, for example, a solution study submitted on 31st December, the approval process may realistically extend into late March or even April. In addition to this aspect, of the transitional framework concerns grid connection request already submitted, for which solution study will not be issued by the end of the year. In these cases, the regulation introduces a clear obligation on the grid operator to refund the amounts collected for the preparation of the solution study, and they will be able to submit their request based on tender procedure starting October next year. However, the methodology does not regulate the scenario in which a solution study is submitted by the end of the year, yet the ATR is not issued by 30 June 2026. And from legal perspective, this omission is perhaps not surprising. As mentioned earlier, the issuance of the ATR is contingent upon cumulative obligation borne by both parties, the grid operator who must endorse the solution study and communicate that endorsement to the applicant, and the user who must select one of the solution and pay the bond. As such, it would be extremely difficult for the legislator to predefine an uniform regulatory consequence for all cases where an ATR is not issued during the transition period, irrespective of where responsibility lies. In situation where a failure to issue the ATR before the end of the transition period can be attributed exclusively to the fault of the grid operator, then the sole remedy for the investor would be to consider a dispute resolution mechanism applicable to grid connection request.
No, I
Uh,
think I think that the operator, or the grid operator and the regulator here have done a good job of looking at the potential risks that are being created over this time period. What one can maybe say is that what we wonder about is a little bit already existing ATRs, and where we have ATRs both for production as well as storage projects, and how that will really play into the solution study, since we all are quite clear on that there are a number of projects that will never be implemented, and how the regulator has really been intending to take that into account in the solution study. I think the solution study will be a bit of a, shall we call it, moving target here. That's how the present solution study, when you develop a project, is also that you kind of wonder, are all those other projects going to move forward? Do they have the financial backing? And in particular, there are also, we have seen that there are these storage projects that have been entered into the market through ATRs, which are very, very large. And you wonder, when you compare to many storage projects in, for example, Germany, which in generally speaking are much smaller, will really all these large storage projects ever be implemented in Romania? But please, Tatjana, go ahead.
Indeed, this is a very good point, and theoretically, the regulation says that solution study must consider the ATRs with no reinforcement work. Reverting on the timeline, I will briefly present what would be the next formal step, which will lead to the first standard. So, by end of June, Transelectrica is expected to publish the available grid capacity, determined without considering additional grid reinforcement works and calculated for each grid zone. This publication will consider ATR and grid connection agreements without reinforcement works. Grid connection agreements where reinforcement work have already been completed and projects already commissioned. Following this, during July, users may submit capacity allocation requests. By 20 July, DCO must forward to Transelectrica the request received, and by 24 July, so by the end of July next year, Transelectrica will publish the final list of complete capacity allocation requests. Next, by 23 October, Transelectrica must complete the global study, identifying the additional development works required to accommodate the requested capacity for each grid zone and for each year of the allocation period. And finally, on 30 October, Transelectrica will organize daily auction sessions. What is the key message for the investor for this timeline is that it creates a standstill period of approximately 11 months for the new grid connections under public network regime. And I think this may impact potential investor that want to enter the Romanian market. Going forward on next slide, which concerns the global solution study, as Mats already anticipated, this plays a central role in the new capacity allocation framework. Its purpose is to identify the additional grid development works required in order to ensure the grid capacity corresponding to a request submitted for each grid zone and for each year within the allocation period. In other words, the study represents the technical and the economic backbone of the auction system, and it will determine whether and under what conditions the requested capacity can actually be accommodated. Mm,
Yeah, I mean, I think here is one of the issues. I mean, we see that the global study, if we take just the example of Turkey, where the authorities have been doing global studies for certain areas, have unfortunately it has taken very long periods to get to the in Turkey to the auctions for those areas. Here we are looking at a complete global study on the whole Romanian market. I would say that there is a high chance that this global study will be delayed, unfortunately. And I think that's something that we, as a developer, we have to take into consideration that putting your eggs into the so to say the auction system will probably be a very long-term plan to follow through with. And I see here from the questions also people are asking about the CFDs and so how that will be affecting also the future auction system, and I think that's a very good question. But I think that the main point about the global study from the market is that I think here we see an initial potential for delay, which will be delaying the auction system to come into place, realistically speaking. Tatiana?
Yeah. Indeed, this is a very good point, and if going back to the timeline scheme, which we presented earlier, we can see that preparation of the global study time allocation for it is for, let's say, between end of June and end of October, which means a very short period of time to prepare the study for the entire country, as you correctly mentioned previously. Because when preparing the global solution study, Transelectrica must take into account general grid reinforcement works that have been already executed, the reinforcement works that are under execution, the reinforcement works that are planned. And the study also must consider electrical generation facility for which valid ATR have been issued, and including the related general grid reinforcement works. So
Yeah, I mean, I think here is also one of the, again, the issue about timing, right? I mean, we have seen Transelectrica obviously have their strategic development plan, and there are, if you look at the ATRs that are being issued right now, there are many of those upgrades of the system that are not even in the plan yet, which means that they are not budgeted for, right? And then in addition that they are not budgeted for, it means that when Transelectrica is going to handle these things, they will also have to go to public procurement. And we have seen some overhead lines that have finalized public procurement, which has taken years to complete, right? And here we see the practical side of this with the global study. Global study has to be using some set of data, and it's clear. But then comes the problem with the global study, and that is that the data that goes into it may actually be optimistic, very positive data, and then in reality, the these overhead lines that should have been in place will continue sliding, especially since there are no budget allocations for some of them.
yeah, I want to add here that in what concerns the existing development plans of the grid operation, which you are mentioning, the methodology provides a specific definition for additional grid connection works, which must be assessed during the global study. So this will be works that are necessary to create the technical conditions to inject the additional power which is requested beyond those already envisaged in the development plan. So your point is important here because delays obviously can be expected. Next, I think we can move to the criteria and the application requirements. Each capacity allocation request must include a set of minimum identification data. Identification data of the generation site, of the grid user, the expected energization date, the total installed capacity, the capacity requested for allocation, the grid zone, geographical location. These requirements can be assessed relatively straightforward and technical in nature. However, which is far more interesting in my opinion and relevant from investor perspective is what the methodology does not require. Unlike the previous regulatory framework, the new methodology does not require the applicant to provide evidence of land rights intended for the generation facility. And I believe this is a fundamental change because under former regime, proof of land rights was a key eligibility condition at an early stage of the grid connection process. And under the new auction-based system, this requirement is absent. When this is read together with the provision of the capacity allocation agreement, which expressly allows for the contract assignment, and considering that the tender will initially require only a participation guarantee amounting 1% of the starting price, um, these together may lead to situations where capacity will be secured through auction without fully secured land position, and capacity rights will be subsequently monetized, or
Yeah.
investor who
I think this is one
please
issue
please ma'am.
where we see clearly a problematic situation where developers may have spent years actually to develop land rights based on the past historical system of allocating capacity. And the land rights is obviously one of the starting points. Then, in addition to that, you have to apply for various certificates, etc., the so-called urbanistic certificate, which is like the starting point of the development. Without the land rights, without the urbanistic certificate, without having secured a location, this is, a clear risk that it will just lead to very opportunistic applications, and which may simply flood the market, as in the past many ATRs have been issued to developers that also had potentially very limited chances of clearing their own developments, just starting it out and hoping for somebody to come in and rescue their project. Which is why there are many projects on the market already at the moment with or without grid connection, in fact. Ta-da.
Yes, thank you for this note, and indeed, permitting under current regulation, which apply until the end of the year, somehow correlated the building permit aspects with the grid connection as well as with the environmental procedure. Now things are splitted, and as I said. Um, we may see the emergency of secondary market dynamic around the allocated capacity. Now we can switch to the next slide, which relates to how auction session will be conducted. Theoretically, we expected a specific platform to be implemented, but so far that platform was not implemented by Transelectrica. Each auction will be organized as a price-based competitive process where participants can submit binding offers expressed in RON per megawatt. During the auction session, submitted offers may be modified or even withdraw, and participants have flexibility to adjust their bidding strategy within the auction time frame. Once the auction is completed and the winning offers are determined, the results will be formally published, following which the procedure will move quickly to the contractual phase. And we will move to the next slide, which is related to the contractual instrument which formalized the outcome of the auction. The contract, the capacity allocation agreement will contain a set of mandatory clauses which must be inserted, as well as clauses which may be subject to the parties' agreement. So the object of the allocation agreement is the allocation of available grid capacity as awarded to the successful bidder in auction process for the purpose of connecting a specific generation site located within a defined grid zone. The agreement will enter into force on the signing date and will remain effective until the later of the commissioning of the additional grid development works or the final energization of the project. This structure reflects the fact that grid access may depend either on network reinforcement work or the readiness of the project itself. It's also worth noting that the agreement must be executed in a very short time frame, several business days from the relevant from the auctions, which um, make that provision in the legislation that state that the parties can agree some additional clauses may make it irrelevant most probably. Next, regarding the payment obligations, the grid user must pay the contract value at least in two installments. The regulation allow for schedule to be agreed. However, there are two mandatory constraints. The first installment must amount at least 20% of the contract value and must be paid within 30 days from the execution date. And the final installment must be paid no later than 4 months from the signing of the contract. In terms of guarantee, payment guarantee, which is different from the tender guarantee, the user is required to provide a guarantee equal to 1% of the total contract value. And this guarantee must be established prior to executing the contract. As already mentioned, even if the methodology allows in principle for the inclusion of additional contractual clauses, there are not expressly part of the standard template. Its flexibility is very difficult as the timeline is very short. On this point, I think mm, the most relevant aspect of the new methodology have been covered. Yet a lot of details are yet to be analyzed and discussed. We are expecting the publication of the order which amends the methodology these days, and obviously we will provide some information on LinkedIn page or via legal alert to our clients. But the main idea and the most important, the timeline which is expected must be considered. For investors, the challenge will not lie in understanding the rules, but also navigating the transition period and aligning its decision with this timeline. Here I will close my presentation, and I want to thank you very much for attention.
Thank you, Tatiana. I think that your presentation has been really, really good to explain the current status and also what we as market participants really have to see in the future. And I've seen that there are a number of questions that have been coming here, and many relevant questions about for example, where will the capacities be allocated in the Romanian market, etc. And I think these are questions that we all are actually asking ourselves, and how this will be moved forward. Personally, I am on the opinion that it will take some time to figure this out, and then it depends very much on the regulator and the grid operator to make sure that they are really providing very attractive areas, since the whole reason to start out this new setup is to improve the conditions. It's not to should not be to make it worse, that there will be less investments done in the market, because the investments are really crucial for the Romanian energy sector to move forward. And I think in particular also with the very strong requirements on green hydrogen, where there are many of the large companies that are today making big steps forward in order to put in renewable energy capacities in order to meet requirements for green hydrogen production. But Tatiana,
I would like to address one of the questions which have been submitted. I tried to cover it in my presentation, but I will clarify. It's Mr. Alfonso Jose Lopez who is asking what would be the outcome of the fact that uh, um, in case the grid operator will not provide the relevant data for the solution study. And this is indeed a very interesting point, because the regulation say that if the solution study has been submitted by 31st December, then the request will follow the current rules. However, in order for that solution study to be drafted, the grid operator, either DCO or TCO, must provide to the company which is drafting that solution study the relevant data, and they usually have delays in providing that relevant data. In this context, the question is who is that fault? And the regulation does not provide, current regulation does not provide a clear timeline for a grid operator to provide the data. However, and we had in our law practice this kind of situations, because in some cases they delay it with 2 months or even more, and consequently the solution study is delayed, and the entire grid connection process is delayed. So one of the remedies, and I think the sole remedy which can be assessed, is going to the dispute resolution mechanism, which is a specific procedure which implies a notification to the grid operator at the first level, requesting that data, and if they will not solve it, then the legal procedure specifically regulated for the grid connection allows the potential user to go to ANRE for dispute resolution, which will oblige the grid operator to provide the data. And in such a situation, I think we can state the fault of the grid operator for not submitting the data, consequently not preserving the right of the grid user to benefit of the transition rules. I hope this answer clarifies. But this misconduct, or maybe not necessarily misconduct, but also simply lack of authorized person to with grid operators can be challenged only on a specific procedure which is regulated, and as already said, we had that kind of situation in our practice with a very good outcome for our clients, requesting the access to the public grid, which is guaranteed according to the Romanian law.
Great. Tatiana, there is also a question which is interesting about whether there are any mechanisms that guarantee that CFD winners are prioritized without undermining the existing ATR commitments, and how will grid reinforcement be funded and scheduled to reconcile these obligations? Is this something you can address?
As per my knowledge, and as already said, we are still facing some in time amendments to the regulation, which a final form has not yet been published. I'm not aware about whether there are prior CFDs contracts are
Right.
prioritized.
No, no. As far as I know, there is also no statement about that I have seen. But I would like to go on the last part about Eva's question here about the reinforcement timelines and the cost recovery structure and so on. I mean, what we have seen in the market here on already projects that are working under the ATR is that the TSO has been now basically pushing away some of the investments in substations away from the wind projects or owner and into general reinforcement, which on one hand sounds good, but on the other hand, it then puts in question the timeline on of these very important construction work of large substations, etc. Now, what we are seeing is that there are obviously ways for the investors to take charge here. And I think that from my perspective, I think that what we will see is that investors in wind projects with existing ATRs will simply have to put in the money and go down the route of nominating EPC contractors and designers for the reinforcement work that they have to have done. And to some extent, I think that is actually not a bad thing in the sense that that means that projects that are funded will actually be able to complete reinforcement works and hopefully be able to do that earlier than it otherwise would be done by the TSO. In Ukraine, in particular, where obviously cash has been from the TSO side been a limited factor, we have seen that investors ended up taking on quite a bit more than what maybe should have been done. But at least we have seen several gigawatts of wind as well as solar capacity being built in Ukraine. And I think here that the Romanian regulator has perhaps not really been pushing the possibility of cooperation between investor and TSO DSOs, which maybe would be a better way forward than necessarily just implementing this, shall we say, as always, a bit theoretical auction system.
Great. Thank you so much. I think our time is almost up, but it's been really, really helpful. Tatiana, it was very detailed and nice. And Mads, thank you so much for all the insights. I think there's just one overall question that I have. Is very general, but overall, and in say 2-3 years, I know that it's going to be on a standstill mode for about 11 months now. But let's say in 3 years, do you think this regulation will accelerate or slow down deployment of renewable energy in Romania? That's for both of you. And also, Mats, from your experience, for companies and developers who are comparing Romania with other Central or Eastern European markets, how competitive does this regulation make Romania?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I've been in Romania since 1998, and I think patience is one thing that you're developing by doing that. Yeah, I would say that, I mean, Romania has a lot of very good wind and as well as solar resources. I mean, that's what really one of the big positive things here. Romanian authorities have not always been the easiest ones in terms of developing regulation and then implementing it practically and getting it to work. I mean, we had a long period when the so-called green certificates were supposed to solve all the problems. I have to admit that we were part of, supporting the government many years back, where we were saying basically that stay away from the green certificate, just do feed-in tariff. That's going to be your make sure that things are happening. We see that Ukraine, that implemented a feed-in tariff system, certainly moved ahead very quickly. Turkey, that I think has step by step been moving forward, and I think putting in nice capacities as well, have done a great job. I think it's a question for, again, for the Romanian authorities to ensure that they are taking care of the investors that are coming to the country. And when you feel well taken care of, you are going to invest in the market. It's a great opportunity in a European Union country. So I think that, in a couple of years, I think that we will have more capacities coming in. It won't be easy. It will be a struggle as always, but maybe for some of us, that's kind of the fun part of it.
Great, Tatiana. And for the first-time comers, so for foreign companies, first-time investors, is there anything in the regulation criteria that makes it particularly difficult for them to enter the market now or in a year?
Actually, if they will not have the solution study by the end of the year, they will have to wait that 11 months period. But they can prepare the other important elements of the project itself, such as finding the land or securing the other important aspects. I want also to point out as a conclusion that this regulation on long term will make Romania more competitive from transparency and predictability standpoint. However, in the upcoming years and on short term, the auction may increase competition and therefore cost for access to the grid capacity. On long term, as said, it should be better planned projects, more efficient use of the grid, and greater investor confidence. So we are facing this shift, which is really interesting, and I will keep my eye on the regulation and hope we will have not only the legislation but also the implementation mechanism required for it.
And let's see what updates we have till February. Matt, any closing notes from your side?
No, I think once again, I think the Romanian market from renewables and wind and solar is really, it remains one of the most interesting markets right now in Europe. And I think existing ATRs are going to be highly valuable going forward, even if there are high costs of entering into the system. So I look positive as an investor that came back in 2020. It was a good time. Now we have a great future, I think.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Tatiana. It's been great, and thank you to all of you for participating. We'll make sure so that you have the recording as well with you within the next couple of days, hopefully tomorrow. In case of any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us, and we hope to see you all in person in February at Energy Week Black Sea 2026. Have a lovely day and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much.